Ladies and gentlemen, Psalm 74, verse 19 to 23. Oh, do not deliver the soul of your turtle doves unto the multitude of the wicked. Please do not forget the congregation of your poor forever. Have respect for the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. Please do not let the oppressed return ashamed. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O God. Plead your own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproaches you daily. Do not forget the voice of your enemies. The tumult of those that rise up against you increases continually. You know, it's very interesting when people, in order to have their agenda, become very dismissive of points made by people. They try to attack the people personally, to try and discredit them so that the things that they say would not seem valid. And that's the case with Justice League. A lot of people have been attacking the messengers, people like myself and other people who show all these interesting and new things about Justice League. And this video is yet another video that shows interesting and new things about Justice League. So in front of you is this poster of Man of Steel, and we see Superman soaring upwards. And the common consensus of these movies, such as Man of Steel, is that Man of Steel is the birth of Superman. It's the dawning of Superman. The second movie, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, most people say it's the chapter in which Superman dies. And most people say that Justice League is the final part of the chapter where Superman is reborn, or the rebirth of Superman. And of course they are correct about that. But a lot of people are so dismissive of Justice League that they will not see another recurrent theme that flows throughout all three movies. Now, if you look at this poster here, I love it because it says so much. We see Superman soaring upwards into the sky, but he's soaring upwards against a backdrop of the symbol that he represents. It is the rise of hope. The symbol means hope. And Superman is not just rising up into the sky, but if you know that scene is actually a scene where Superman is going to save the world. And he sped up through the clouds. This was after he had dealt with Lewis and General Swanwick. Dr. Emil Hamilton was there, and they were discussing the plan to take down General Zod's World Engines and General Zod's army. And Superman goes soaring up into the sky. And he takes off with a great speed to get to the next side of the world to deal with the World Engine there that's terraforming the world. But even as you watch this photograph, it means something else. This picture shows us the birth and rise of hope. And so that's very, very interesting. When we look at the next poster, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, we see that the bat symbol is imprinted inside the heart of it, the center of it, the symbol of hope. And the reason Zack Snyder chose to use V opposed to versus is because of that. This symbol is literally saying Batman v Superman. Batman with Superman in him. Batman carrying Superman in his core. And of course, Dawn of Justice. So Zack really takes time to make his symbols and his posters. The final poster reminds us a lot of a poster you would see by one of the great artists in DC. And everyone talks about it being that particular poster. You know who the artist I'm speaking about, his name is, so I'm not going to say his name at present. But in this beautiful portrait here, the positioning of the characters is very interesting. We can see that all the characters are surrounding Batman, all of them. Superman, Aquaman, Cyborg, Flash, Wonder Woman, they're all surrounding Batman. But interestingly, Superman's head is close to Batman's chest. And I thought this is a very intriguing thing, but I won't go into too much more about it, except to say we realize that the Justice League was formed around Batman. Without Batman, this Justice League would not have been present. Now, all three movies, a lot of people overlook this. And it is, people talk about Superman's birth, his death, and then his rebirth. But I want to show you that all three movies, the most important theme in all three movies is actually birth. Not death, but birth. So when we look at Man of Steel, it is the birth of Superman. And Zack Snyder chose to show this in two ways. His literal birth on Krypton, and then his metaphorical birth on Earth, where he learns his purpose and he comes out in a costume. But that costume is symbolic of him being the pinnacle ideal that brings two worlds together, Krypton's world and Earth's world. And there's a coexistence of Krypton and Earth in Superman, which is interesting. He's called Superman and not the alien from Krypton, which is very interesting. So Superman is able, the birth of Superman is what Man of Steel is. Now, most people agree that the birth of Superman is what Man of Steel is, but Superman is, there's two very important things I'm showing in this picture here, which Zack is illustrating. Zack is illustrating that Superman is not from this world. He's from Krypton. But in the picture below, we see that Superman lives on this world, has been cultured by it, and he's coming out to represent the highest ideals of it. Someone who is not of this world is embracing the world, and he's found out his purpose, and his purpose is to help the world, guide the world, by showing the world an ideal they can strive towards. So I find that both paradoxical and ironic, and yet at the same time so beautiful. Of course, we've highlighted this in videos before. Zack Snyder uses repetition, or what we call uses the double motif to emphasize this and give different shades of meaning. So that's what Man of Steel is. It's the birth of Superman. It's literally the dawning of Superman, the beginnings of him. I find that really beautiful. And another thing that Zack said, which I find very interesting, is that movie was exploring the humanity of Superman, because we were seeing things from Superman's perspective, and we get to see how he would feel, because he's been cultured as a human, how he would feel in that environment. And so why Zack chose to use Man of Steel is because he really focused on the man aspect of Superman, and not the Kryptonian aspect of him, even though that is in the movie, and we know he's Kryptonian. But we focus on his humanity, on what he has been cultured to be, and how he deals with being rejected, how he deals with the fact that the world will know about his powers, how he deals with having to cover up certain parts of his being, how he has to learn to temper himself while he is in the shadows. So it's very, very interesting that Man of Steel, why Zack chose to use the word man here, was because he was really focusing on the human aspect of Superman, the man part of him, not the super part of him, even though that's in the movie. And so a lot of people say, well, why Is it, I listen, a lot of people talk about, Man of Steel, there's a lot of action at the end of the movie, but, in the beginning of the movie, we're not seeing all that action. Well, it's because Zack Snyder's trying to let you identify with Superman as a human being, as humanity. He wants you to cement in your mind the human part of him, the man part of him, and how he grows into a man, and how he embraces the values of his parents, and he chooses to go certain routes. We see the Kryptonian aspect of him through Jor-El and his interaction with Jor-El. But still, while that master design by Jor-El is brilliant, it's really the focus of more the Clark part of Kal-El, and not so much the Kal part of Kal-El. And that is why Batman and Lois Lane and even Martha Kent, they focus on Clark and not on Kal-El, which is very interesting. It's only when General Zod comes on the scene that Kal-El pops up, and then Clark's mother knows he's Kal-El, and the world knows he's Kal-El, even though the world doesn't know exactly who he is. So I find this very amusing, very interesting, that Man of Steel focuses on the man of him. Even though it's the birth of Superman, it's really the man aspect of him in Man of Steel that's very important, which is what Zack is pointing out. And this is a man that's growing. Because we are focusing on the man part of him instead of the super part of him, which would make it very fantastical and very detached. Because we're focusing on the man, the humanity part of him, we're able to identify with him and also see some of his growing pains, some of his mistakes, some of his errors, some of the choices he has to make as a human because he cares for other humans, like the great angst inside of him and the split, the pain he had to suffer in not preventing himself from saving his father. That must have been, tremendous. And you remember Superman's birth out of a Shakespearean tragedy. He's like birthed out of the destruction of Krypton. Out of that one good thing that happened was he came to be. So it's a very Shakespearean story. It's a very tragic story. And it's really interesting how much tragedy and much difficulty Superman has faced in his young years before he's even Superman. And so that's the nice thing about Man of Steel. It explores all those things. And I just wanted to unpack that. But most importantly, it is about the birth of Superman. In fact, in Batman v Superman, he's not even called Superman. There's only one point in Man of Steel where he's called Superman. And the rest of the movie is not called Superman. And then in Batman v Superman, interestingly enough, he's not called Superman either. He's called the Superman for most of the movie. It's only in Justice League he's actually called Superman, which is very interesting. Which leads us to Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And there is a very important birth that happens there. And it is the birth of Superman once again. In fact, all three movies actually cover the birth of Superman. And in this case, it's the birth of Superman's essence in Batman. Particularly the Bruce Wayne aspect of Batman. And I think the filmmakers made a point of Bruce Wayne speaking and not Batman speaking. And what's interesting is that the essence of Superman is hope, of course, as we already know. And that's Zack is going with these ideals. He's not trying... You see, what I like about the symbolism of this stuff is Zack is not doing hero worship in his movies. He is giving you the ideals that these heroes represent. And as a result of that, we can go after those ideals in the real world. So this stuff actually means something in the real world. It's not your Cavalier kind of superhero movie. And so the birth of Superman in Batman is a metaphor, of course, for hope beginning to spark up in Batman, but not really Batman, but really Bruce Wayne. Batman has been Batman almost all his life. Bruce Wayne has been secondary to it. Some people will argue Bruce Wayne was dead. Metaphorically speaking, of course. And that it was just a cover, it was a shell to house Batman. And we see that come to a head in Batman v Superman when Batman is really vengeful and hateful and rageful, and he's at the end of moral depravity. He's about to, cross that brink and just cross over there and just go totally bad, right? And Superman, because of his love and his hopefulness, his care for humanity, his the man part of Superman, the man of steel. While he is steel on the outside and all of that, there's a man in there. That man, that human aspect of Superman, is what touches Batman. And Batman can relate to it, and it transforms him, and it gives him hope. And you hear Bruce Wayne say all kinds of hopeful things that Batman doesn't generally say. Batman's not that kind of guy. Batman is a skeptical guy. Batman, you heard Bruce Wayne talk to Alfred earlier on. He was talking about how many good men are left, how many stay that way. That's Batman. Batman he's somewhat narcissistic. He's very much a preventative kind of guy. He's kind of like a cop. He sees people, but he's looking for criminals and thugs and dirty people. Okay, that's Batman. Now we see a Batman we have never seen before, ever. Not in live action, not in cartoons, not even in the comic books. I think, well, actually, I may have to look in the comic books yet again, because there may be a hopeful Batman somewhere in there. But this Batman is saying, well, actually, Adam West's Batman was kind of a hopeful Batman as well. So I have to really renege on my statement there. But Batman becomes hopeful. And so these statements are just something you just never really hear Batman say. Batman says men are still good when Wonder Woman is telling him, men made a world where standing together is impossible. He turns around and says, men are still good. He's still gritty. He says, we kill, we fight. But we can do better. We will. We have to. And so that kind of hopefulness, we never heard Batman do in the DCEU, at least. And he wasn't behaving like that before. So that Batman carries over into Justice League. That's the Batman we carry over into Justice League. We literally carry into Justice League Batman v Superman. What I mean by that is Batman with Superman in his chest. Meaning, however you want to take that, metaphorically or, mentally, psychologically, however you want to take that, that's what is going into Justice League. And that's the thing I think a lot of people just didn't grasp. They're like, why don't we see bruising Batman anymore? Why isn't he, narcissistic and, morally bankrupt? No, because Superman changed it. If you didn't understand the Martha scene in that whole entire movie, then you won't get Justice League. Batman in Justice League is a hopeful Batman. And so it culminates where you hear him say, he was more human than I am. The Man of Steel. He's shouting back to Man of Steel, which Zack Snyder was focusing on the man, not the steel part. The man, not the super. And now we see Bruce Wayne actually acknowledge the man part of Superman. And then he goes on to say the world needs Superman. And basically, the Bruce Wayne you see in Justice League, Bruce Wayne, note you, not Batman. Batman is still Batman. Batman is now checked. Batman is now the Batman we saw in Suicide Squad. But nonetheless, Bruce Wayne has changed. Bruce Wayne now in Justice League is a hopeful Bruce Wayne. And Batman is now subject to Bruce Wayne. Before that, in Batman v Superman, before Batman was converted by Superman, Bruce Wayne was subject to Batman. And almost the entire of Batman's career, Batman has been dominant over Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne was all about ensuring his parents' death didn't happen again. And he's still that way, but now Bruce controls the Bat. Bruce controls Batman. The balance is now back in check and in a whole different kind of way. And so what we see in Justice League is now we see a hopeful Bruce, which is trying to get all of the Justice League team together. And at the end of course, Batman v Superman, we hear Bruce saying, they'll come together and we will fight. And we will fight, right? And in Justice League, you see him pushing. The hope is driving him to pull this team together, even though his skill sets are not there. to pull the team together. And he even says it. He says, Clark would have pulled this team together better than I ever could. He knows his limitations, but he's still driven. At a certain point with Diana, Diana says, you can't do this forever. And he says, I can barely do it now, but this is the job. Steppenwolf. This guy, if his intestines were out of his body and he could still move, he would keep on going. That's Batman, right? But he's driven now by a different sort of motivation. His motivation is hope now. He's not driven by revenge. He's not driven by trying to just stop something horrible from happening and scaring the bejesus out of whatever is happening, even though that ends up happening anyway. But he is actually driven to emulate what Superman did, to inspire other people, to drive other people to come together. And that is why Batman, when Aquaman slams him against the wall, he's not giving up. He's not budging. He's not going to fight back. He could probably fight back. He'd probably lose that battle in a hand-to-hand. But it's not about fighting back. Whereas in Batman v Superman, before he was converted by Superman, it was all about fighting back. It was all about avoiding being dominated by a metahuman, dominated by a superior being to himself physically. But in Justice League, it's not about that. It's about getting these people together so that you can protect the world. It's all about hope. And that's what's driving Batman. Superman is driving Batman. And Batman, he's been looking for a way to have Superman there. And when that opportunity comes where he realizes that the technology that brought Cyborg back can bring back Superman, he's not wavering. And he's going to find a way to win over the team. And he's using logic and reasoning, and finally Cyborg comes on board. And he's not backing down. And Alfred's trying to argue with him, he's not backing down. Even though he still overlooks the fact that he has a team that can help him, he's not backing down. And so Batman's not a perfect guy, obviously. He's an asshole at times. He's very rough. He's very crude. He tries to push people to the limit. And if they kill him, so be it. That's Batman. And so you see him get slammed by Wonder Woman. You see him get slammed by Aquaman. Superman basically is about to break his neck. The only guy that he doesn't push, he pushes to the limit, but the only guy that doesn't retaliate to him is the Flash. Okay? Or Cyborg. All right? And Cyborg's kind of a guy like Batman. He's very logical, so he and Batman kind of vibes, and the Flash kind of vibes with him. So half of the team basically body slams him. Then he gets beaten up by parademons, but he doesn't give up. And this is the kind of Batman we're seeing. A Batman who always has been relentless. That's a given. He's always been a guy who's trying to prevent something from happening that's bad. He still gets his way in that Steppenwolf caves into fear, even though he's not the guy that's caving Steppenwolf into fear. So it's Wonder Woman and it's Superman. He pulled the team together. So at the end of the day, Batman's still accomplishing what he wants, but his motivation is different. His motivation is, I got to assemble this team together. I got to not let down Superman in his death. I got to do this. And so that's his motivation in Justice League. And it's amazing because that's Superman indelibly imprinted in Batman. It's never going to go away. And so even at the end of the movie, when Superman's saying, I can't thank you enough for what you did, Bruce, and Bruce is still saying, oh no, I'm just trying to right a wrong. Because Bruce feels he's indebted to Clark for the rest of his life. Talks about buying the bank to get the house back. And Clark is like, man, I can't thank you enough, Bruce. And Bruce is like, oh, trust me, man. I'm just trying to pay off a debt. Just trying to right a wrong where I made a mistake. Because Bruce is indebted to Superman. Superman gave him back his life. He gave him back Bruce Wayne. Before that, Bruce Wayne was this cover for Batman. And what's so funny? In Batman v Superman, Bruce isn't even trying to be a cover for Batman anymore. He's just straight up Batman. He's walking everywhere. He's done this so long. He's not trying to put on a charade. He's not trying to trick people like, Lex Luthor's trying to put on a charade now. Not Bruce. Bruce is not even trying to pretend anymore. He's walking around like if he's Batman. You know, he's very sarcastic. You could see he's worn down by trying to get these criminals, you know, bring them to justice. And it seems as though he's just in a world home, a loop of criminals popping back up. And so after 20 years, he's like not even trying to pretend to be Bruce Wayne anymore. Even though Bruce Wayne's there, he'll answer to Bruce and stuff, but doesn't really care. You can see he's more like Batman. And it's so funny because now when we see Bruce, he's alive, he's got back his life, he has a reason to live. You can see that Bruce, at the end of the movie, he's talking about, you know, look at this. Yeah, I can see it now. 6 cheers. And he's all excited, you know, 6 cheers. You know, and he's talking about, Alfred, do you think, what do you think, it's 500, 600 feet? You know, and you can see him talking about the dimensions of the place because Wayne Manor was dead. You know why Wayne Manor was dead? Because Bruce Wayne was dead. And now he's bringing back Wayne Manor and the glory of Wayne Manor. He's looking to do the Hall of Justice and get all his friends together. Because he talked to Amanda Waller about me and my friends. We'll stop you if you don't shut it down. He's talking about his friends now. And it's kind of crazy because Bruce does not see Aquaman as an enemy. You know, the typical Batman, he's always, you know, skeptical of everyone, and he doesn't take any chances. And of course, Batman, just because he says you're my friend, doesn't necessarily mean that he's not having a contingency plan of some kind, just in case you go, you lose your rocker, right? And so you see that even though Superman, he considers Superman his friend because he says, I'm a friend of your son's, to Martha Kent in Batman v Superman. Even though, Clark is considered his friend, Bruce is not taking no chances. So he had a contingency. He was like, we got, Diana's right. If the thing goes south, we need to bring out the big guns, right? So you can see that Bruce, he's always got a contingency plan in place. And believe it or not, he's got that kryptonite spear. I'm sure about it. He got that kryptonite spear. If things really go south with Superman, he gonna have some kind of kryptonite on standby. You know what I'm saying? But it's just that, when you look at Bruce Wayne, he's alive now. He's got a reason for living. And you see it at the end of Justice League. You see that. That's the birth of Superman in Batman. Or the birth of Superman. Or the rebirth of Bruce Wayne. Let's put it that way. That little kid that was smiling with his parents in Batman v Superman. Go watch it. Watch it, the facial expression. That was smiling and laughing with his parents. That's what you saw with Bruce Wayne when Wayne Manor was being converted into the Hall of Justice. Go and watch it. Go watch it again. I tell you, these movies have a lot of rewatchability. Go check it out. So the second movie, the most important part of, that's the Dawn of Justice part of Batman v Superman. And that's what this whole symbol means. That's what Zack was going for. Zack's very heady, man. He's very intellectual. And so that's why Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. It wasn't about Batman going up against Superman, even though that's why he didn't emphasize on too much of the fight. The fight wasn't that long. It's because it was really about Superman imprinting who he is, the man part of Superman imprinting in Batman, and makes Batman say he's more human than I am. That's the part of Superman that Batman carries into Justice League, which is why it's the Dawn of Justice, right? So we get to Justice League. Everybody knows Superman is reborn. That goes without saying. And Batman's driven to rebirth Superman. I said that in the last video. But what everybody keeps on overlooking, the multiplying effect, the blessing, the double. It wasn't just the rebirth of Superman. It was the birth of the Justice League. That's why the film was called Justice League. Alright, so let's go back a bit. Because every single film title Zack Snyder uses is a very important title. The Man of Steel. Why would he choose Man of Steel instead of Superman? Because he wanted to focus on the man, not even the steel part of him, the man. And so there's a certain iconography in that whole entire movie where we see that man, and now we see him as the Man of Steel, which is why that title, not Superman. Even though Superman is born in that movie, however you want to look at it, literally or figuratively, it's born in that movie, and somebody dubs him Superman. He doesn't call himself Superman. Somebody calls him Superman, right, in the movie. But at the end of the day, this movie's about the man who just happens to be Steel. He's tough. I'm not talking about Steel, the comic book character. He's tough. He literally is tough. He's like steel. His skin is like steel. His strength is like steel. It's inflexible. He's almost indestructible. Okay, all right. And then we have Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. That's a lot of thought that was put into that title. People are saying, "Oh, the title's too long. Why did you put the Dawn of Justice part?" Okay, now we know. And notice, Zack put it over the Dawn of Justice. The Dawn of Justice is smaller. And why? Because that dawning of justice, it's like when you look at it, Star Wars, the hope that lights the spark that leads to the flaming fire. Okay, so the spark here, the spark here is the dawn of justice. It's the hope inside of Batman's chest, which leads to the flaming fire, which is the Justice League. All right, you got it? Now, the Justice League, this particular portrait here, right, is interesting. Let me show you why. So, Batman v Superman is Batman having Superman within him, the hope within him. And below that is the dawn of justice, right? Now check this out. So here's Batman on top of here, all right? Remember that hope is inside of Batman's chest. And below him is Superman. Superman is the dawn of justice. Ain't that crazy? Literally, this is like Batman v Superman. This logo is like Batman v Superman, except for one thing. We got the entire league with it. So it's just so crazy, man. I love seeing the visual imagery of Zack Snyder because there's so much you can read into it. So this entire poster here is now manifested as this entire poster. Because of Superman, this whole league was pulled together. Because Superman was inside of Batman's chest. Man, it's so dope. It's so dope. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. You know, I think that this stuff is worthy of talking about. It's not just intellectual stuff, because this is what I'm trying to say to you guys. When you step out of the shadows and you start recruiting people together because you're motivated by an ideology and you really believe it, it leads to the manifestation of something beautiful. That's how movements start. Now, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, it talks about how to keep a movement going and sustain it in the face of adversity. So that's what Star Wars: The Last Jedi does. And Black Panther, it basically tells us about reaching out, coming out of the shadows, but it also speaks about both sides, looking at the other side of the story. Because in Black Panther, we have both sides of the refugee crisis. We see, for instance, that refugees come to Wakanda, and then we see the Wakanda leadership. That is when people think that T'Challa is dead. His leadership, and of course Killmonger, he takes over. Now they have to flee Wakanda, and they are refugees, and they go to the same guy who was beaten by T'Challa, and have to find refuge with him. So we see both sides of the equation, and there's a lot of beautiful things in Black Panther that I find wonderful. Besides talking about nationalism versus globalism, I find that the movie also explores one very wonderful thing. Even when your mentor, T'Challa's father, made a mistake, and because of that mistake, T'Challa felt he was subject to the consequences of that mistake, that he couldn't change it. But no, you can make a choice, and you can choose to go in a different direction. You're not necessarily subject to the mistakes you make. Now, that's different to what we saw in Man of Steel, where Jor-El felt that he was subject to the errors of the world he was in, he and Laura, and he thought that they could not get out of that. Of course, they were much later down the line, having been complicit in allowing Krypton to its core to collapse, and they didn't have any ships to get out of there. They didn't have no phantom drives. They only had a phantom drive for the sun. So I can understand that, but still, at the same time, you know, T'Challa being younger and so on, and he being the progeny, he still would feel that he would be, he was subject to the consequences of such action, which he was. But you still can make a choice in that whole thing to turn into a different direction, which is what T'Challa did. And I thought that was very brilliant, because it tells each and every one of us, you still have that power of choice, which is what Man of Steel is all about. It's about the power of choice. All of Zack Snyder's films about that. And you have the choice to change the outcome, that you don't have to go down that pathway. We are not victims of our past, which means that we can't make choices to turn it in a different direction. And we know so many people. Oprah Winfrey, she came from a very horrible background, very horrible past, but she chose a different direction. Yes, she was aided by mentors and different people in her lives that helped her to choose a different direction. But the point is, you can choose at any point in this thing. You can choose to go a different direction. If you're addicted to drugs and stuff, it doesn't mean you have to go down that road because your parents are addicted to drugs. Or even if you were born with a parent who is out of a parent who is addicted to drugs, which gives you a propensity to want to use drugs. You still have a brain. You can make that choice to go in a different direction. So I hope that these videos will help to inspire you and help to encourage you that you can also be this nucleus to band people together for an ideal. You don't have to have all the skill sets. Batman didn't have all the skill sets. All right? So I hope that this was a video that just wasn't just about a movie and unpacking a movie and making, looking at the gloriousness of the movie. No, this is about translating into you and my everyday life. And if that doesn't happen, then what's the use of watching movies? It must change you. You must leave a movie changed from when you went into it, because there was something that it imprinted on you to help you better deal with human beings like yourself, even though you don't do it perfectly the first time you try to implement it. All right? So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed the scripture. You guys have